Welcome, and thank you for being with me today. Where I live, we've been in severe lockdown since the start of the pandemic, and there's no doubt it's been an extraordinary time. But what I found really fascinating is how people deal with it in such different ways. You might be surprised to know that some people actually like lockdown. They get to work from home, they don't have to rush out the door, they don't have to sit in traffic, they don't have to wear a suit to work, they can just wear their comfortable track pants. So they're experiencing a slower, more relaxed lifestyle, and they have some freedoms that they just didn't have before. Other people choose to simply accept what's happening, and they're the ones who post on Facebook photos of their dogs with masks on, and they figure, well, we might as well just make the most of it. And so they make videos of themselves putting out the rubbish in their wedding dresses or their tuxedos. And then there are some who are frustrated by what's happening, like I was this week when I was at the supermarket. I was buying my vegetables and I took one of those plastic bags off the roll, and those bags always stick together, but normally it's okay. I just lick my finger and it opens. But I couldn't do that this time because I had a mask on. And so I was trying to open it and feeling extremely frustrated about it. And then just over here was a guy who was having exactly the same problem as me. So he walked over to the hand sanitizer machine, squirted it on his hands, rubbed his hands together, came back and opened his bag. And I thought, why didn't I think of that? But the point is, when we're in lockdown, it's sometimes just the smallest things that can really frustrate us. And of course, there are those who protest loudly about their lack of freedom. So Jesus talks about freedom in John. And he says, if you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And he was speaking to the Jewish people, and they said, well, we've never been slaves to anyone. And then they asked him the question, what do you mean by saying you will be made free? And here we are in lockdown. It's almost 6 months now, and it's really hard to see how the truth would make us free. One of my good friends lost her job at the start of the pandemic, and she's the main breadwinner of the family. She's got a couple of children, she's got a mortgage, and it's been really hard for her. So how's the truth going to make her free? It's an anxious time for business owners. How does the truth make them free? And it's heartbreaking for anyone who's lost someone due to COVID. So how's the truth going to make them free? And so here we are in lockdown, and there's just this strong sense of lack of freedom. And Emily Cady, one of the great New Thought writers, wrote this book, Lessons in Truth, and she talks a little bit about that. She says, people have been led to seek the truth for the reward. During the last few years, they've come to know that God is not only able but willing to deliver them from the burdens of their everyday life. Everyone wants to be free, free, free as the birds of the air. And so it's natural that we want freedom, but what does freedom really mean? If we're sick, we want freedom from sickness. If we're poor, we want freedom from poverty. And so for some of us, freedom from poverty might be having extra cash in the bank so we can go on a holiday, or we can buy that sports car that we really want. Of course, for a homeless person, freedom from poverty might mean having a warm bed to sleep in at night. We might want freedom from bondage. And so there's not much freedom at the moment being stuck down in lockdown. But, for an African-American person, and we've been seeing a lot about this idea of slavery, and with the Black Lives Matter movement, they want freedom from slavery. And I hear you say, well, maybe slavery doesn't really exist anymore, but discrimination is slavery. When we look at a person and we think they're different to us, that's a kind of slavery. So we want to be free from that sense of bondage, even if it's a thought or an attitude we have to certain people. In fact, the word freedom, of which freedom comes from, is based on an Old English word that literally means emancipation. We might want freedom from suffering. Just ask someone who's in an abusive relationship. They'll tell you all about suffering. Or we might want freedom from error. Well, wouldn't that be great? Not to make any mistakes anymore. And you only have to visit the local prison and you'll probably find it's full of people who'd love to be free from their past mistakes. And so Emily Cady goes on to say that we have a right to be free. It's our God-given desire and our God-given right. Well, when I was a young girl, I had a budgie as a pet, and I loved that budgie. It used to sing all the time. It was just a beautiful little joy-filled bird, and I used to love to go and talk to it and spend time with it. And one day my parents went out, and I decided that I would get her cage and bring her inside and talk to her inside. So I did that, and then after a while I decided that I wanted to see her fly. So I just very carefully shut all the doors, and I opened the door to her cage, and out she shot, and she flew around and around and around, and she was so happy, and she was singing and clearly enjoying her freedom. And I realized that's probably the first time she was ever let out of the cage. But what I didn't think about was that we had windows that were high up on the wall, and there was one window that was open just that much, just enough for a little budgie to squeeze through. So she found that gap in the window and off she went to her freedom, and I never saw her again. And lately we've been seeing a few people on the news who are exercising their right to freedom. No masks, no social distancing, no pandemic. Well, John Pope Paul II said that every generation needs to know that freedom consists not in doing what we like, but having the right to do what we ought. So it's not easy to describe what freedom is, because it's a feeling, and it's relative to who we are. My budgie had her own sense of freedom. I have my sense of freedom, and you have your sense of freedom. And so that scripture of John that says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free," is really about what's your truth. And many of us are spiritual seekers. We're looking for the truth. We know there's something greater than just what's here, what we're experiencing here in the earth. And it's that truth of that something greater that lifts us up and makes us really feel free. And so we might be in lockdown, but we're never locked out of the truth, that truth that lifts us up to a greater freedom. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, speaks about our ability to think. And he says that this is how we can become a free agent. And so in lockdown, we might not be able to go without, but we can certainly go within. And it's within that we hold our creative center. So Charles Fillmore says this is how we build our world. Through this faculty, we have the ability to receive spiritual ideas. But he says we need to be able to cut ourselves away from the illusionary universe in which we are forever unraveling tangled ends and chasing shadows. Therefore, we can see that this faculty is like a rock. It's a foundation on which our consciousness and indeed our life must be built. And so I love that idea he talks about, unraveling tangled ends and chasing shadows. And don't you feel sometimes like you're trying to unravel ends, you're trying to sort out problems, you're trying to let go of, things that are going on and sort things out, and that looking into the shadows, like what is that person doing or what's going on over there? So he's saying don't get stuck in all that earthly stuff, because this is the illusionary universe that we live in. And so we've got to get that idea of lifting ourselves up to a spiritual freedom. That's the lifting up we spoke about earlier. We need to pull ourselves out of the small stuff and become aware of that foundational rock within us, which is our creative center. I discovered something interesting this week. Did you know that the ancient Chinese compass had 5 points and not 4? And so most compasses we know have north, south, east, and west, but in the Chinese compass, that was the 5th one, which was where you were. And it seems a bit odd, but when you think about it, it makes sense, because if you don't know where you are, you don't really know what direction you're heading in. And so you see, we have to know where we are, because we're the starting point. In the scriptures, a similar idea is illustrated in Revelation 21. It says, "Behold, I make all things new. It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end." And so the Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet, and the Omega is the last one. And it's really a declaration of our creative power, because we're constantly creating. We get new ideas, we shape them, and we mold them in our minds, and we kind of prepare them before we put them out there in the world. And so it does begin with us. It begins in our creative center, and it really has nothing to do with what's going on out there. And so during this time of lockdown, I've learned something really interesting about myself. I've learned how easily I can be distracted by what's going on out there. And it's actually been one of my most creative times. I started a podcast. I've been doing online workshops and online classes and discussion groups and a whole lot of things that I never would have had time for normally, because I'm so easily distracted. So we might be in lockdown, but we can never be locked out of our creative center. So here we are in amongst a pandemic, and it's understandable that we might feel a bit lost, a bit like a ship at sea. And so some of us are waiting for what's going to happen next, and we just want to get on with it. So we might be physically locked down, but we can never be locked out of our own sense of freedom, and we can never be locked out of our creative center. And so it's a great time to get to know yourself, get to know your truth, get to know where you're at, or what are the things that you like to do. And so if you want more freedom in your life, maybe it's a time to let go of some old habit, something that you've been so used to doing that's become part of the daily routine, but it doesn't fit anymore. And that might give you the space to put something new in there. It's a time to become aware of how you spend your time. What do you love doing? What's something you've wanted to do for ages and you just haven't had a chance? Maybe you could explore your creativity. Listen to a new sort of music, read a different sort of book, or maybe do an online dancing class. I don't know. It's a chance for you to get to know yourself. Remember, you're the 5th point of the compass, and your direction starts with you. So that friend of mine that lost her job that I spoke about earlier, she gave me a call last week, and she got a new job. And she was so excited. She said, "It's completely different to anything I've ever done. I've never done any work in this area at all, and I'm loving it. I just wish I'd done it years ago." And so maybe it's a time for a new something in your life. Remember, it's the truth that will make you free. And the truth's not out there. It's in here. It's not what someone else does or says. It's your truth. And so as we allow our creative center to unfold, we're doing the work that we're meant to do. We're here to be creative. That's our purpose. And when we're creative, we are taken care of. Not that we get everything we want placed at our feet, but we get to use our own creative resources. And when you live from that center, you will attract all the freedom and all the creativity you could ever want. And that's the truth that makes us free. And so it is.